Welcome to Crafts and Crime. I'm Amy,
I'm Elaine.
and this is the second time we're recording this.
Guys, I'm still learning how to use my microphone.
It's okay. There's a lot of buttons and stuff to figure out. Because I usually check all the controls, but then there's stuff on our microphone. And the first time we could not figure out what was up with our microphones, and it was just backwards. So now we know we got to add one more check to the list of our audio, but
Yeah.
we try hard to sound good for you guys.
We do our very best.
Yeah, but we're not perfect.
It's not meant to be perfect.
No, not at all.
Because life is not.
But that was really bad because I could barely hear you.
Yeah. I knew there was
so
something wrong, but everything looked right until I saw the little decibel switch on my side.
Yeah. So we figured it out, and we have a lot of announcements this week. One of which is Patreon.
Yay!
We decided to do a Patreon mostly for the extra bonus stuff. And right now, the first level is called Mommy's After Hours.
Yeah.
And it's just us, like you said,
chit-chatting.
Yeah.
Yeah. So after our topics, the little bits that don't necessarily fit in, that maybe not everybody wants to hear us have a conversation about the dumb thoughts that went through our head as we were doing our research and stuff like that. Extra bits. It's just not necessarily going to be as appropriate as the rest of our conversations.
There might be a little bit more
potty mouth.
Yeah, exactly. So if that's your jam, then you can.
It's just like hanging out with us.
Yeah, exactly. And it's funny because when we did a test run of our audio before we even started recording episodes, we were just getting set up and we recorded. What was it like
a half hour,
yeah,
45
something
minutes
like that
of us
just talking.
Silly.
Yeah, we were talking about ideas for the podcast and we were just messing around, and we sent it to your sister and I sent it to a couple friends.
My mom, I'm not sure. Yeah, and everybody loved us.
Yeah, they were like, "You guys are so funny." So we're like, "Okay, we'll do that on Patreon. Just it's that extra stuff." So yeah, we'll announce that on Instagram. So follow us on Instagram. We'll probably announce all that if you follow us already before then, because this won't be out until the 23rd, and it's the 2nd now. So so we'll announce all that on social.
Woohoo!
And then do you want to announce our special arrival?
Yes.
Okay.
We have a child for everyone. We have the birth and arrival of our little buddy and our mascot, Crimey. He arrived at just 10 grams and 8 inches long. And he's the little drawing mannequin guy on our icon. And so he's going to be with us, hanging out with all of us and getting into nonsense. And we'll post some funny pictures of him. But he's our little buddy. He's everybody's little buddy.
Yeah. So that'll be fun. I have ideas already on the...
Imagine Elf on a shelf, but just destroying craft projects, I think, is probably what we're thinking.
Yeah, or in Mommy's After Hours getting into trouble, getting into my wine.
We're going to do a Find Crimey for everybody.
Yes.
Maybe we can do it really fun and do something silly for people.
Yeah, I know. We have lots of ideas coming up. So it's more than just a
Stick
podcast
around.
if you want to do other stuff with us. So yeah, just stick around and it'll be fun. So I guess I will just go straight into our craft.
Okay.
So I am talking about spinning.
Yay!
So originally I had started researching something else, and then I realized there's just so much more that could come before this. So I decided to do this first. So the art of spinning fibers dates back all the way to about 20,000 years ago. There were some archaeological finds, such as the evidence of string skirts. And there's also been some evidence of cords that were spun that date back to the Neanderthals about 41 to 52,000 years ago.
That's super crazy. That's a super long time ago.
Yeah. So plant fibers and animal fibers were used back then. So they would basically just get whatever was fibery, and they would roll it between their thigh or their leg, and their hand. And then they figured out that they could add weight to the bottom to help spin it. I guess
to stretch and lengthen.
Yeah, exactly.
I can totally see that being something you would do just sitting around. You're fiddling and rolling between your fingers, whatever. You just, that's kind of natural. We sort of do that, and then it started to form. That must have been so cool.
Yeah, and so I was thinking we should totally try this with the Angora fur.
Oh, that would be super fun.
Yeah, because I raise Angora rabbits and other rabbits, but I have 3 right now, and one of them is pulling fur. for babies. Yeah. So usually I have to go in and, as you know, because Angora fur is so like long, they're the longer furred rabbits, so it can get very stringy, and I sometimes have to go in their nest and like cut it up. I think you helped me one time with like cutting it up because it can yeah, it can get wrapped around the baby's like foot. It's happened.
Just
their
like human
neck.
babies.
So it'll
Scary.
like cut off blood supply. So yeah, so that fur, like we should totally try. Like just the hand.
That would be super fun.
The hand
And we could
method.
record it for everybody.
Yes, and that's where Patreon comes in,
Yes.
and that'll be another level. Or if you want to watch us do the stuff, then you can go there.
We will do it.
Yep. So the next form of spinning, in history, was the use of a spindle and distaff, and the spindle was usually a stick, like a long stick, about 8 to 12 inches long, and it had like a notch to hold the fibers. And then the distaff was like a long stick where the unspun fur or whatever fibers was like held onto it to keep it in place.
Oh, okay.
And they would sometimes stick it in their girdle, like the women, to
Yeah.
hold it in place, because then they would just use one hand to pull it from the distaff, and the spindle they would spin with the other hand.
Okay.
So it's like a 2-hand process.
Wow.
Yeah. And there's some pretty cool pictures I found of like paintings of it and stuff. So
Ooh,
I'll
okay.
post that on the on our Instagram.
Cool.
So they would wind these up, like it would wind up onto the spindle, and that's where like your yarn or your fiber is, or your spun fiber.
Okay.
So after doing it like this for a while, they realized that it was much easier to spin the fiber on the spindle when there was already like the fibers spun on the spindle.
Oh,
And that's because it added weight. So then they started adding a weight to the spindle, and this is called a spindle whirl. And it was typically like a disc of stone, clay, metal, wood, whatever, like attached to the bottom.
So the same exact item used way back then, just a more modernized version.
Yeah.
put
So it's the
together
same
for
thing.
it.
They were just like, we're just going to add weight to the bottom. And so it just helped spin it easier, I think, because there was weight to it. It's not this like fiddly stick that you're just like, oh, I can't get it. So that's why they were like, oh, it's got weight on it.
Like when you're trying to untangle something and you hold it out and it drops.
Yes,
and
exactly.
Okay.
So they actually found in the Neolithic era, about 12,000 years ago, these spindle whorls. So they would attach the twisted fiber onto the spindle whorl and then twist the spindle, lift it up, and let it go, and it would drop down, and it would spin the fiber as it drops down. And this is why it's also called a drop spindle.
A drop spindle.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, I totally know what that is from being in the SCA back in the day with my mom. If for people who don't know, a lot of people don't. It's called the Society for Creative Anachronisms, and they hang out and like pretend we're in medieval times, and people would do that, and I would watch ladies do that. So I've seen it done.
Yeah, I watched a really cool YouTube video, and I'll link it in the show notes. Yeah. But she just shows how she like uses the drop spindle, and I'm like, they always make it look so easy, and I'm like,
for sure,
man,
it's not
I
at
get
all.
like
no
clumps in there, like it's not
it
gonna be pretty.
breaks.
I drop it like straight onto the floor. I wouldn't catch it in time. So yeah, that video was pretty cool when I watched it, because I was like, oh, this would be pretty easy to do, I guess, when you're sitting there watching TV, because you just literally like, whoop, you could sit and do it. Like,
and
that's what she was
your
doing.
muscle memory, you're not gonna have to like look at it and watch it. You're gonna feel it and just
exactly. So
sounds relaxing.
Yeah, it was relaxing watching it. I'm like, that looks like fun. But that's just my crafty brain.
Exactly.
The next art of spinning fiber was the use of a spinning wheel. And it's really hard to determine, like I couldn't find, and a lot of people don't know who who first invented the spinning wheel. But it's believed that it was originally invented in the Islamic world around 1030. And then it spread to China around 1090.
Okay.
So there's artwork depicting depicting spinning wheels in both Islamic and Chinese artifacts. So we
Those
know
amazing rugs and stuff.
Yes, I know there's some pretty cool artwork. I'm like, man, there's so many pictures I want to share.
Well, we can. And if everybody wants to look, there's got to be people like us. I want to see it all too.
I mean, you could just look it up, like ancient, Islamic spinning wheels. And then, so it was both in the Islamic and Chinese regions, and then it spread to Europe by the 13th century. And artwork in Europe shows the spinning wheel was found like around 1280. So like those artifacts kind of show like, okay, it probably came around that time, so 13th century.
Okay.
In medieval times, poor families relied heavily on spinning their own fiber to make their own clothes, and usually young single women or unmarried women were the ones who were doing this all day, and that's where we get the term spinster.
Because they had time to do it.
Yeah, and it was not fun, I bet, when you have to do it. And so, yeah, it was, the unmarried one, so that's where the word spinster. I was like, I don't know why I didn't know that. I told Jack, I was like, I learned something when I was doing my research. So that's new to me. But there are different types of spinning wheels. There is the great wheel, which is also called the walking wheel because you kind of walk back and forth. You have to like spin the wheel with one hand and then you walk backwards and pull the fiber. Then you go forward and spin it. And so it's with a hand.
So it means literally walking because you're walking
back and forth.
Oh, okay. I wondered why. That's okay.
Yeah. And that is a spinning wheel I have.
We're going to learn.
We will. So my spinning wheel, I scored off Facebook Marketplace for like $100. And it's like from the late 1800s, early 1900s. It's really old. And so there's a lot that needs to be fixed on it.
Sleeping Beauty. Now I get it.
Yeah. So I'm going to talk about that later too. So yeah, this type of spinning wheel is good for, it's called the long draw technique because longer fibers are used. So there's different kinds of fibers. There's two different kinds of spinning with two different lengths of fiber. There's woolen spinning, which is short wool, usually about like 1.5 inches long. And then there's worsted spinning, which is long wool or mountain wool. And those are generally like 12 inches long. So kind of like
when you shear an alpaca or something.
Yeah, or an Angora.
Really long.
Yeah, they're really long. So
like
that's
really those long hairy sheep. Okay.
So that's really good for the walking wheel that I have, which is perfect
Very
for the Angora fur because it's longer. And I think because you have to pull it longer, you're not doing real short, like you would just lose it.
Right.
So.
And the short fibers you're constantly having to feed in. To feed in.
Yeah. So the long draw technique would produce the worsted fiber. It's not great for like weaving like tight material, because the shorter material obviously gets you thinner and more precise.
I gotcha.
The worsted, that's like the type of yarn, it's like worsted weight or whatever. So it's a little thicker. So the oldest spinning wheel is the tabletop or floor charka, I think it's called.
Okay.
It's similar to the walking wheel because the wheels need to be turned with one hand while the other hand holds the fiber. But you could like sit and do this. It's like they could set it up on a table. And there's, once again, really cool pictures of those. And the charka is actually a symbol of the Indian independence movement.
Oh, love it.
Yeah. The wheel helped India become more like self-sufficient in producing their own clothing and other items. So they didn't have to depend on, the British as much.
Like imported. Oh, okay.
So yeah, the charka, I'm probably saying that wrong. It played a large role in India gaining its independence and ending the British rule in India because they no longer needed them. So Leonardo da Vinci developed drawings that were then turned into the Saxony wheel in 1555 by Johann Jürgen in Germany.
Fun.
It's also called the flax wheel or the castle wheel, and this type of wheel helped spin flax fibers into linen. And using flax to make linen has been dated back to Egyptian times.
I think I have flax flower growing
in
in my wildflower bed right now.
I was just thinking like we should start because it's supposed to be really good for rabbits, the flax seed and stuff. And I was like, man, we could do flax. So it's like in the stem. The fibers are like in the stem.
So you have to like crush it and pull them out. Peel them. Ooh, my goodness. Okay, we'll totally have to double check.
So it dates all the way back to Egyptian times. And there's there's paintings of flowering flax in like the temple walls. And the mummies were embalmed using linen. Like they were covered in linen. I'm having a problem with my words.
That's okay.
So Egyptian priests only wore linen because it was considered pure. So yeah, I want to grow flax now. Like if
the flowers are cute.
I was just gonna say the flowers are so pretty.
Yeah.
So anyways, in the 14th century, the Chinese developed an automatic water-powered spinning wheel.
Whoa.
And this helps spin fibers much faster and more efficiently. And then, of course, the Industrial Revolution came out with many new inventions. They just wanted to speed up the process.
Mm,
And
of course.
in 1738, Lewis Paul and John Wyatt patented the roller spinning machine and the flyer and bobbin system. And this allowed more wool to get like produce fat, like it made a thicker yarn.
Okay.
So 2 sets of rollers moved at different speeds, and then the yarn was twisted and spun like really fast.
Okay, I can totally envision that too.
Mhm.
Gotcha.
So in 1771, Richard Arkwright invented the water frame, which used water wheels to power looms to produce cotton cloth. So obviously, as we know, like cotton became like very popular. It wasn't just linen and like animal fibers. So then cotton. Obviously, over time, the production of fibers like has totally improved and is now just done primarily by machines. But you can still find hand spun like alpaca, sheep, Angora, like wool. You could buy it in bulk and spin it yourself if you want to. Many people take it and like dye it or, you know, just leave it natural, and they make like yarn and sell it on Etsy. I've seen it on Etsy like all over. And
The artisan world is coming up, and people are really learning to appreciate these types of things and pay that little bit more money. Not that there's anything wrong with just your acrylic yarn, but it's a labor of love that you're paying for, because let me tell you, having to wash out the lanolin from animal fur is caustic, and really it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work, and the cost of sheared wool actually is worth less than the bag they bag it in. It's crazy. Yes, because my mom and sister and stepdad used to live on a farm, and the landlord had sheep, and we talked to him about it, and I think like this is a terrible estimate. Farmers, you can let me know, but it was something like, for ease of math, like the bag cost him $20 to hold. You know, like we're talking like it's an 8-foot long bag. It's a huge bag, and the weight of the wool inside was worth like 12.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
It's really strange. I found an alpaca farm near us because like I would have an alpaca if I could, but we have a little suburban backyard. We can't do that.
I know. I love them, but they're herd animals.
Yeah.
So you have to have like over 3 or 5. It's crazy. And
yeah.
They're not cheap.
No. Yeah, so that's why I'm like, we'll just go to the alpaca farm. And I already looked at like prices and stuff, so that's what I was looking at before I even got my Angora rabbits, for because I bought my spinning wheel. I don't even know, I was just like, I'm gonna learn this, and I found the spinning wheel, and Jack went and picked it up for me, and then I was like, I'm searching for alpaca farms, and I found one, and so I'm like, we just need to go, and then we never did. And then my spinning wheel's just sitting in my bedroom. It's cool. It comes apart.
Yeah.
So I don't have to keep a giant spinning wheel. But cool. I remember a friend came over and she was like, "What do you have in your bedroom, Amy?" Like weird. The big wheel. It was just the big wheel. And she was like, "What is that?" And she's like, "Tell me you didn't buy it." It was Sarah. And I was like,
giant
yes,
wagon wheel.
Yeah. So it was like, of course you did. And I just had to show my mom one part of the spinning wheel, and she already knew. She's like, "You bought a spinning wheel." I'm like, "Yes." Usually if I like want to try something new, I just do it.
We will do it.
So finally, wrap this up, some fun and interesting facts or things.
Hit me.
So spinning wheels are seen in literature and folk tales, as you know. Think about like Rumpelstiltskin, where he imprisoned a woman until she could spin straw into gold. And then, as you said, Sleeping Beauty, where Briar Rose pricks her finger on the spindle.
Yeah.
But it's funny, though, because a spindle is not sharp. You can't prick your finger on a spindle. It's like, I should have grabbed my spindle over here. It's like dull, because you don't want to like get it all caught up in your yarn.
Exactly. Or poke yourself.
Exactly, because you kind of have to have your finger.
You're going back and forth all the time.
Yeah, exactly. So, but the actual wheel that was used in the Disney movie is a Saxony wheel, the one that has a pedal. So like a Saxony wheel has a pedal. And Louisa May Alcott, who wrote Little Women, she also wrote a bunch of short stories and called them spinning wheel stories. And they were meant to be read to the person who was doing the spinning so that they could be entertained while
that's
spinning.
Cute.
So
I love that.
Yeah. And that's all about wheels. So we have, just starting with rolling it on your hands, something that I'm sure like, anyone can do at home. sitting watching TV. I'm rubbing my leg. I'm like, I want some fiber.
I keep fiddling my hands back and forth.
I have a baggie of Angora fur somewhere. Like when they like there was some I gathered when we first got them. So I'm like, I'm gonna sit.
We're just gonna twiddle it.
Exactly.
Twiddle.
So
They're gonna be like worry stones for my story coming up.
Oh, I know. Okay,
Are you
I know
ready?
you. I know. I'm ready. I know you've been working really hard on this one.
Okay. My story is on the Corpsewood Manor Murders.
Corpsewood Manor Murders.
Doesn't it sound spooky?
It does. It almost sounds like a game.
Like, it does. It does. It's a really good name.
Mm-hmm.
So, we're starting off in Wisconsin. Dr. Charles Scudder was born October 6, 1926 in Wauwatosa, Wisconsin. He had a really wealthy family. They all went back as being like doctors, surgeons, pharmacists. He was an accomplished painter and a professional harpist. He had multiple languages degrees, a degree in zoology, and he eventually got his PhD in pharmacology at Loyola University, where he became a professor. And he ran the boy, today is just our day.
It's not our word day. The day we have to say all the words.
He's the director of the Institute for Mind, Drugs, and Behavioral. And specifically, he studied LSD. It was, by then, it was in the times, it was the 40s and 50s. And, so he really liked his job. He was quoted just saying, it was a good job. He was a super kooky, eccentric guy. We're talking the 60s. And he would dye his hair purple or red. And he had you're right. And he had a pet monkey.
Oh
my gosh. He used to take his monkey to work.
Do you remember when Jack said I wanted to get a monkey? I think we told you about that.
Yeah, my mom wanted a monkey when I was a kid,
way.
too. The university stopped funding his work because it was like, the reefer madness and LSD times, and they were realizing like people can't control their behaviors, and so they stopped funding it, and he didn't need the job. He didn't need the money. So on his 50th birthday, he retired. He resigned technically, and he took 1,200 doses of LSD with him because he technically
owned it,
made it. And
okay.
So there's not a lot in his early life. He had 2 failed marriages, and after those divorces, he had custody of all 4 of his sons. And they moved to actually a Frank Lloyd Wright mansion.
Oh, really?
Yes, and it had a giant pink gargoyle on top. It was pretty cool, and it was like really run down and raggedy, but he loved it. He loved the open spaces. He had a lot of large antiques and stuff. So he needed a housekeeper for his kids and himself, and so he had hired a man named Joseph Odom. He liked to be called Joey, and the couple fell in love, but they had to keep it secret because for the kids and also just the times in general.
Oh, okay, yeah.
But their close family, like their close friends and family knew. And so Joey was born March 27th, 1938. His life was pretty typical, but then he dropped out of school in the 5th grade, which is really strange. Yeah. And so at that point, it's like 1944. No, I'm sorry, maybe 48. And he turned to, lives of crime. And when you drop out of school at 5th grade, like, what the heck are you going to do? And he ended up in jail pretty young, but he turned his life around and he learned to cook. And that's what his job was. He became a chef. So that's how he was hired on. That's how he got hired. So they were together for, years. And in the early 70s, Charles is really into reading Mother Earth News. And I have those magazines.
Okay. I was like,
and they decide, most people who do like farming and urban homesteading and stuff have them. And I have a whole bunch still, which is funny. They both realized they wanted to escape the life of bills, electric bills, all the bills that go along with that, and that's not what they wanted anymore. So they purchased 40 acres of land in Chattooga County, Georgia, and it was a long trail that headed up to where they eventually built their property. And heading up the trail, it was closed off by the body of a dead horse. And at the time of year, all the trees were dead around there, and Corpsewood Manor is born. So that's where they got the name, because they were like
okay.
artistic and eccentric.
Why the dead horse?
I don't know. I think someone probably put their horse out of their misery out in the forest, like
so
away
they're,
from.
like, just left
I think
it?
so,
Oh,
or it
that's
got
so
away and
weird.
died. Yeah. So, brick by brick, they hand built a little castle together.
That's crazy.
And it had a little farm patch. They grew almost all their own food and all their own fruit and grapes, because they like to make their own wine. And there was no electricity. The heat was only from a wood-burning wood stove, and they had a chemical outhouse toilet outside. Outside of the house, they built this, what we call an outbuilding, and it was 3 stories tall, a matching little castle building, 3 stories tall. The bottom floor is a chicken coop. The second floor is canned food storage and pornography.
Oh my gosh, why do those go together?
Right? And then the third story is, they call the pink room, or the pleasure room.
Oh God, this got gross
And
real fast.
it's the entertainment room, because they actually just don't allow people in their main house. Exactly, right? But they don't let people in the main house. So this is actually just the hangout room in general, but there is a lot of sexual things that do happen there.
Okay.
So when they left the mansion, they left almost everything behind. They took a handful of antiques and like Charles' harp, but they pretty much did not leave with much. But the big giant pink gargoyle came with them.
Oh, it did.
And it topped the front of the house, and that was like a cool thing that people would notice. One of the other things he added to his house was he handmade this stained glass window, and in the middle was a depiction of Baphomet. So for people who don't know, Charles was a member of the Church of Satan.
Oh.
And so basically they were living there for 6 or 7 years, and in that time they are out in the middle of the forest, and poor kids would go cruising and driving around and hiking, and they would find the house, and so these rumors would go around of, like, let's go sneak up to the scary mansion where the homosexual devil worshippers live.
Yeah.
And they would go, and they would be greeted happily by Charles and Joey and offered wine, and they would get to hang out and sit. They had 2 really big English mastiffs named Beelzebub and Arzanoff. And so they would all hang out. So, I mean, it was the typical, like, don't judge a book by its cover. It was not a thing that was talked about.
So they weren't like evil people, horrible people. Yeah, it was just they had
That's
different...
something we'll talk about in Mommy's After Hours. But yeah, they were good people, and it's just a very huge misconception of how people treated them. It's just a choice.
Well,
that
and
they
for the
made.
time,
exactly, and even for the time now, people are judged for that as well. So in this, the teenagers coming to scope out places, people would also show up and ask for permission to go hunting around the area, and they would happily give permission for people to do that. And one of the people that did come to do that, his name was Kenneth Avery Brock, and he liked to go by Avery. He was born in 1965 in Walker County, Georgia. His dad died when he was about 7. Besides that, he ended up with a really abusive stepdad. And right before he graduated from high school, he dropped out just because he wasn't doing well anyway, and his mom kicked him out, and he became homeless. But he was a pretty good worker, and he would keep up. He would try to do his best. He would do any odd jobs that he could find. And at this time, we're doing some work in a trailer park. He meets Samuel Tony West, and he goes by Tony, so that's how I'll refer to him.
Okay.
They become friends because Tony's dad is also not alive. Tony West was born on August 11th, 1952. I know we're just moving on through here.
A lot of people.
Yeah, a lot of people. He struggled growing up. His dad was injured in a train accident before he was even born. There's not specifics on that, but he ended up with really crippling, debilitating back injury. So his mom stayed home to take care of the kids, and his dad kind of did what he could, but they lived off disability. So they were, kind of unfortunate in circumstance. And then his dad dies when he's 10.
Oh, wow.
And so now his mom has all the burden, and his life is becoming harder. So when he's 13, he accidentally shoots and kills his 2-year-old cousin. They were playing with a gun.
What?
And even though it was accidental, he was sent to a psychiatric facility.
Oh my gosh.
Until he was 18. And those places aren't easy for anyone, let alone a child in those developmental years who just made a mistake. And, who knows how that contributed. So when he gets out of there, he goes to crime. He doesn't have any job experience. And so he turns to crime, theft, drugs, getting into fights, petty crimes, getting arrested for those kinds of things. Around 1979, he gets married, and he gets into a fight with his brother-in-law, and he shoots him.
What?
4 times.
What?
The guy lives.
Oh, God.
Yeah,
okay.
the guy lives. And so, yeah, he turns himself in because he's like, obviously, he's going to tell. And when he's arrested, the police realize he's already an escaped convict from a penal farm in Georgia already for some other crime he made.
For like another
different crime.
Yes. Oh.
So he gets 3 years in prison for shooting his brother-in-law, but they didn't even add on the time served for the years that he was on the run. It was crazy.
Oh, okay.
I'm not sure why they did that. So his wife is tired of him, and she divorces him. And so he has to move to a trailer park. And we're just moving right through. 1982, it's November. Avery and Tony are just going to go hang out at Corpsewood. They're now pretty friendly with Charles and his partner, Joey. And they're going to go hang out and get drunk for free because they would always offer their guests wine. And it was no problem. There was nothing expected, Yeah. So they go over there to hang out, and they're up in the pink room because, again, they don't let people go into the main house. And Charles starts to perform a sexual act on Avery.
Okay.
And it just goes along without a hitch. Nobody says anything. He asks Tony, if he's into it. Tony says, no, thanks. And they leave.
So they leave the two of them.
Yeah, they
They're
leave.
like, we're
and
outta
then when
here.
they're all done, they leave. And Tony and Avery are in the car. And he is freaking out, telling Tony, I'm not gay. This has never happened before.
Oh.
And Tony's kind of just like, okay, I'm pretty sure you're comfortable here. And he didn't judge him for that. But as Avery's continuing this rant, he's finally like, we should just kill them. He says we should just kill them, and then we could live in their house for free because they live out there, and it's just the two of them, so we could probably live there for a while. Nobody would know.
Let me clarify. So the 2 guys that came and the 2 guys that live there.
Yes.
One of the guys that lived there did something to one of the guys that came over.
Yes.
Okay,
Charles.
okay.
Yes. Charles gave oral sex to Avery up in the pink room because they had sex parties.
So that's
it was
why
a comfortable
he's
thing for them.
freaking out.
Because his friend saw, and he's feeling ashamed, trying to pretend like it's never happened before.
Yeah.
And he's
trying. Like I said,
to,
there's so many names.
Yeah,
I'm like,
I'm
I want to make
sorry,
sure.
there
No.
is.
I want to make sure I'm following it correctly.
One of the things that he's trying to say is like, oh, he got drunk and took advantage of me now, which that is absolutely, you have every right to have been uncomfortable at it. But Tony is also pretty sure that this has happened before, and he's trying to save face. They think that, they have that big giant castle and they have a bunch of antiques in their house. Like, there's absolutely got to be money there. So we can kill them, rob them, live there, do whatever we want. And it's going to be a long time before people realize.
Oh, yeah, because they're just in the middle of nowhere, basically.
They're just in the middle of nowhere. Yeah, and they only run errands like once every 6 to 8 weeks.
Okay.
So they don't need to leave very often. They're always there. A few days later, they drive back and they're ready. They're ready to do this.
Oh,
and Tony, they're ready. And Tony says, hey, did you bring a gun? And he just tells him, no, I brought this big knife. And Tony's mentioning to Avery, what about the dogs? There's those 2 huge dogs.
Oh,
For people that don't know, you can Google it, but an English Mastiff is like a 150-pound dog.
I always think a Mastiff is massive.
Yes, exactly. They're huge.
So I know any Mastiff is like close to like 100 pounds or huge.
Yeah, at least. So they realize that maybe this isn't the greatest idea right now, and so they leave. And a few days later, Avery goes to his mom's house and he finds a .22 caliber rifle that used to belong to his dad, and he takes it, steals it. Who knows if she wanted him to have it. And so he's got it now and he's ready. December 12th, 1982, Tony and his nephew Joey. Now we have 2 Joeys. I'm always going to refer to him as nephew Joey. It'll just be easy.
Okay.
Yeah. So Tony, his nephew Joey Wells, and his date for the day, her name is Teresa Hudges. This is nephew's Joey's date, Teresa Hudges, and Avery all get in the car and they're going to go. And they're just telling nephew Joey and Teresa, we're just going to go hang out up at Corpsewood and just drink, hang out and drink. And so everyone's fine with that. And they drive up. They go to the pink room immediately. Everybody starts drinking. And they also really like to huff glue, which is really gross.
Ew.
Yeah. So everybody's, completely zonked. And so Avery's able to sneak out, goes to the car, gets the rifle, and he comes back and he immediately pulls the knife on Charles, holds it to his throat. And he, is telling him, don't move or I'm going to slit your throat. He cuts up pieces of sheets from one of the mattresses in the pink room and he ties up Charles by the wrists.
Oh, okay.
And he's immediately screaming, where's your money? You've got to have money hidden away. People living off grid. You're not going to keep your money in the bank.
Yeah.
Like, I know you have it here. And Charles is telling him, like, there's nothing here. I promise we don't have anything here. And they didn't.
Yeah.
Avery gets really angry and he leaves and goes down to the main house. And Joey is in there just cleaning up dinner from cooking for everybody.
Oh, yeah.
And so he doesn't realize. And Avery has the gun pointed at the back of his head. He turns, he gets startled. He makes a run for it. And he is shot in the left arm and in the back of the head. It doesn't say which dog ran up. They look identical. But when the dog runs up and he shoots at the dog and both of them run away. He goes over to Joey's lifeless body on the floor and he shoots him 2 more times in the head just to make sure.
My God.
To double check, yeah.
Okay.
Avery now goes back to the pink room and Tony, Teresa, nephew Joey, and they all carry Charles out to the main house now because they've got to carry him down the flights of stairs.
Oh, that's right.
And then out. And so to the main house. And Avery finds the living dog, kills the living dog, and then shoots the dead dog again just to make sure. Tony is now questioning Charles and he's, same thing. Where's the money? It has to be here.
Yeah.
He tells him, hey, I need a soldering iron for probably some torture or stuff. Oh, no. And Charles is like, dude, we don't have electricity. Exactly. We don't have electricity. What are you talking about?
Why would we have indoor plumbing?
Why would we have that?
Yeah.
And so he's kind of getting tired of what's going on. He can see Joey partially from where he was at. So he gets up. He's still tied up. He gets up off the couch and he starts crawling towards Joey's body on his knees. No. And at this point, Tony is just like, well, I don't think they have anything. And so he tells him, hey, I'm going to shoot you. And Charles does not listen. He keeps going. And Tony shoots him in the back of the head. And he falls over into like a bookcase kind of on one knee. And then Tony walks over and shoots him directly in his right temple.
Oh, my God.
So Avery and Tony now, they're running around the house trying to they're stealing some antiques, anything that looks valuable at all, when there really wasn't much. So they're pretty pissed. They come back to find Charles is still alive. And Tony shoots him 3 more times. And then he takes a silver engraved bracelet, a diamond ring, and a gold medallion necklace that were all on him, just snatches them off. Yeah. And it's almost worse to like steal stuff off a dead person.
Exactly.
Like it's like way worse, I think. And in the process of Avery running around the house, he finds some handcuffs and a .22 caliber revolver. And then he takes the keys out of Charles' pocket to his Jeep.
Okay.
So they're ready. They're ready to go. And they leave in Tony's car and it freaking wrecks and just a little bit like in a ditch. So they have to use the Jeep. They tow it out. It's making them take longer.
Yeah, to get out of there.
So Tony is driving his car and Avery has the Jeep. They're driving it out. And this is so funny and stupid. Tony sells his car to his nephew Joey for $7. Like all the money he had in his pocket. And crazy. He promises like he'll give him some more money later. And I believe the amount was like $67. It was so strange. And Teresa wants to call the police. She didn't participate except for
she's probably like, I'm just on a date.
Yeah. So Teresa wants to call the police and nephew Joey does not want to do that because he doesn't want to get his uncle in trouble and he knows he'll go to prison probably forever. So Joey's mom drives Teresa home and Teresa breaks down and she tells her everything that happened. The mom agrees with her son. So she says, hey, you're going to come stay with us. So they go pick up Teresa's 2-year-old kid, and they are essentially like
holding
forced
her, like,
to stay at the Wells house now.
just
And
so
she
she
is
won't
locked
say
in a
anything.
room for
Oh
4
my
days
gosh.
to keep her there so she won't say anything while they're trying to figure out, like, oh my God, what do we do? So Avery and Tony tell their family that they're going to go to Florida, but instead they take the vehicles and they start heading for Mexico.
Okay.
They pull into a rest stop, and it's in Louisiana. And when they wake up in the next morning, it's just them and a single car parked next to them. There's a man inside. He's sleeping, and it's U.S. Navy Lieutenant Kirby Phelps. So they realize they need a car that nobody knows is missing or taken. So he gets the revolver and he knocks on the window. Kirby, rolls down the window, and he says, hey, it's fine. Take whatever. It's no problem. I don't care. Take the car, whatever you want. So Tony handcuffs him and he takes him out to the woods at the end of the rest stop area. He unlocks one hand because he's going to, like, wrap his arms, I guess, around a small tree.
Okay.
And Kirby punches him. So Tony shoots and kills him immediately.
Oh, no.
He shoots him 3 times in the head. I'm not even sure. He didn't say if he had planned on doing this either.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure if that was his intention right away. I'm sure probably. Why wouldn't you at this point? So they leave his body right there, one handcuff on the hand, just leave him there. They steal his wallet and the keys to his car. And so Tony is going to drive Kirby's car and Avery is driving the Jeep. So he abandons the Jeep in a secluded area and they get in Kirby's vehicle.
Okay.
So December 15th, 2 men are metal detecting for Civil War relics. It's their hobby, and they think that they see, like, a mannequin. And
it's never a mannequin.
yeah, and so they go over and they see the lieutenant's body, and they drive to a gas station to use a payphone, and they call the police.
Yeah.
So the crazy coincidence, that exact day, December 15th, a friend of Charles and Joey shows up to the house. His name's Raymond Williams, and he's going to tell them that a mutual friend has passed away. Oh. But as soon as he pulls up to the house, he sees the Jeep is gone. If the Jeep is gone, that means they're both gone on their monthly errand trip. So he says, oh, I'll just come back the next day. He comes back the next day. The Jeep is still gone.
Which is
completely out of character.
Yeah.
So he now comes up to the front door and he immediately sees it's a little bit open and there's visible bullet holes in the door, in the door frame. So he leaves and he calls police immediately. And when they come in, they find Charles and Joey's bodies and Beelzebub and Azeroth pretty close by all together. So 600 miles away at this same time, it's so crazy. It's happening at the exact same time. They locate Charles's Jeep in Tallulah, Louisiana. So from where they were in Georgia to Tallulah, it's so close. It was pretty easy for them to match stuff up because they were looking for Charles' Jeep at this point. They find the Jeep, so they're searching it as a crime scene, and they find some of those .22 caliber bullets that were used. So now they're thinking, this has to be connected to the lieutenant as well. So they're realizing, oh my gosh, there has to probably be more than one killer at this point.
Yeah.
They start to piece it together. It's connected. So the next day, December 16th, Teresa manages to get away from the Wells house, and she gets to a payphone and she calls her uncle. She tells her uncle what's going on. Her uncle picks her and nephew Joey up, and he takes them to the police station, and they tell them everything.
So Joey's finally like, I'm gonna talk.
Yeah, I think it's at this point there's no hiding it anymore.
Yeah, and she was literally held at his
For
home.
days.
So it's like either you're
gonna get in trouble if you don't say something.
Exactly.
For sure.
You're gonna get in worse trouble if you don't
Exactly.
say anything. Yeah.
So they tell, and the arrest warrants are immediately issued for Tony and Avery. By now, they are going towards Texas, and they are running out of money, and they're getting real tired of each other at this point. And so they figure, you know what, let's just split, and Avery hitchhikes until he can get to a payphone, and he calls for his mom to come pick him up. Again, crazy coincidence, because their arrest warrants have just been issued. almost immediately after his mom gets off the phone with him, the police call her. So she tells him where he's at. So instead of his mommy coming to pick him up, whoop, whoop, it's the police that are coming to get him.
Good.
Yeah. So they pick him up, and he immediately gives them Lieutenant Phelps' Navy ID card, because at this point, he's a John Doe. I'm sorry, because the wallet, he has no identification on his body.
That's right, because they took everything.
So now they can positively identify him, and they call who they need to call for him. Just a few days later, broke and completely alone and pity-partying himself, Tony is he's resigned to just driving back to Georgia, and whether he's going to get caught or not, he doesn't care. He drives back, and the car breaks down 1.5 miles or 1.5 miles or 2.4 kilometers from the Georgia border in Chattanooga, Tennessee. Because of this was the final straw. He leaves the car, and it's pouring rain, and he walks. The first thing he sees is a bar, and there's a cop car in the parking lot. He goes right up to him, and he says, quote, "Go ahead, take me." And the officer's like, "What?
What are you talking
What
about?
are you
weirdo?
Exactly. I have no idea who you are." So he runs his name and information, and there's no warrant for Texas. And so Tony explains to him, and he agrees to drive him over the border into Georgia so he can turn himself in. When they get there, they in fact confirm that information, that he does have a warrant out for the crimes he said. But they're worried about the legality of taking him across the state lines from Tennessee to Georgia. So the officer drives him back to Georgia, literally over the line, so he can walk over of his own free will to an officer waiting to arrest him immediately.
That makes sense, I guess.
Because they just don't want to take any risk.
Yeah, no chances. That could totally screw everything up.
And exactly. So they don't want to have to deal with that. Avery at this point is actually already being charged, and they want to try him as an adult. And so they also want the death penalty. Oh, wow. And he's offered a life sentence in exchange for a guilty plea, and he takes it because he doesn't, he's young. He's only 17 years old.
That's right.
He's only 17. You don't want to die. I mean, at least in prison, you still have a life, I guess. So he accepts it. And Tony pleads not guilty. And it's going to go to trial now. And his defense is so ridiculous. He says that he was protecting himself against the demons and the satanic rituals inside of the house. Please. Yeah, he would say that the furniture would glow and that all this stuff.
Is he trying to get like an insanity?
I don't. Well, it sounds crazy, but I'm not sure. And they think it's ridiculous because now what's happening is defense is pushing that Avery and Tony's drinks were laced with the LSD because during the investigation, they found 3 vials of the LSD. One of them was unopened and full. The other was half full, and one was completely empty. Well, prosecution had the glasses and all the wine tested, and everything had no LSD residue on it at all. So that, was thrown out. And then Avery testified against Tony because, he's already in jail for life.
And he already, because he pled guilty. So
and so they know.
I got nothing to hide now.
Exactly. So
I'm not going to let him get away with it.
Exactly. So he testifies against Tony that they had planned it. They had planned it, not a huge amount of time, but it was definitely premeditated. Yeah. It wasn't just let's rob them. It was let's kill them and rob them. Yeah. So.
Yeah, because they had gone there before, didn't have a weapon.
Then left.
And then came back. Yeah.
So he's charged with all 3 counts of first-degree murder, and he's sentenced to death.
Oh, wow.
But the conviction is completely thrown out because there was an issue with Tony's indictment. It doesn't say what it was, but apparently the judge was completely aware of it. And so the case is thrown out. What? And they have to do a retrial.
Oh, gosh.
But, let's be real. When stuff has gotten out in the news, even though you were supposed to have a completely unbiased opinion, he knows he's going to be found guilty. Right? I'm sure it was given a different judge. The judge knew as well, yeah.
That's what I always wonder, because, there's a lot of people that follow, local crime or whatever, and how especially now when everything's like right at your fingertips. How hard would that be to like
the jury of your peers?
Yeah,
and now everybody knows
that read
he's
it on
guilty,
Facebook because it
sure.
scrolled by.
Yeah,
you know?
now it's definitely different. But even then, I'm sure it was in the newspapers already.
Oh yeah.
So so he knows it's not going to be good for his retrial, and he just pleads guilty.
Mm-hmm.
He's sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. And at this time, Tony is still alive in Wilcox State Prison in Abbeville, Georgia, and Avery is still alive in Coffee Correctional in Nichols, Georgia.
Wow.
And that's the story of that.
Whoa.
It's really sad, super
really
unfair.
is.
Just two people trying to live their best life. I mean, the wild sex parties and all that stuff. That's
but teach their own.
But
you do you.
Yep.
Just
they weren't hurting anybody.
Exactly.
They were adults consenting, and they're just trying to live in as much peace as possible, and they did not get that.
I know. When you were talking about their life, I'm just thinking like, oh man, that's what I want.
It
would
so
be
good.
so nice to be able to grow our own food.
I don't want a
everything.
chemical outhouse.
No, no. I do want indoor plumbing and
forever.
electricity, but I don't.
Although
want to pay
living
for it.
here, we could take a shower outside until like October.
Seriously, it was so hot last week. It was in the 90s.
Yeah, it was. It was like 94.
Yeah, it was so hot. But yeah,
It's terrible.
that's another reason why I'm like, no, I can't live off the grid with unreliable electricity. I feel like you're powering your own stuff, like that Homestead Rescue show that we watched.
Yeah. Oh,
I'm like, yeah, me too. But I would love to do that, but it's not for everyone. So the fact that they were just like living their life off grid, basically, you know, doing their own thing, and they were nice enough that people knew they could come around. And
yeah, they welcomed anybody.
Yeah, it's sad.
And then they welcomed the wrong people.
Yeah, that is really sad. It makes you cautious about being nice to everyone.
Yeah,
seriously, just even hearing that, because I'm like, well, I'm not mean to
No.
anyone that I can think of. It's just so. Wow, that's really sad.
The poor puppies. It's
I
all
know,
so
I was
sad.
Like, why?
But that is just like, and apparently the dogs didn't even come up to attack them. They knew them,
They were
so
probably
they
just
were
barking,
pretty
like,
friendly.
what is happening?
They just ran up, like, what's going on? And it's all sad.
It's always, isn't it? It's like I'm really sad about the dog.
I'm
really sad about them.
It's all sad because it was also completely unnecessary. Who the dog's gonna tell?
And the fact that he was like crawling towards him, trying
towards
to just,
his
like,
partner to be. I think he
just
knew.
To be
He knew
with
what
him.
was gonna happen.
Yeah, so he probably
went to
knew
go.
he was gonna die too and
So
wanted
they
to
could
be
be
with
together.
him. That's so sad.
It was very sad. They finally got to live the life they wanted out of the, awful speculating eyes of.
And all
the
his
times.
sons were like out of the house. Yeah, so it's
Grown.
like
They weren't
the gold.
even with
What do
him.
they call it? The golden years, like the
Yeah.
best years of your life. Is just like
Drinking wine and having sex
Yeah.
and growing food.
Seriously, that's what I want to do.
It should have been in Mommy's After
I know.
Hours.
Sorry, I was.
This is
going to
be the
early.
sneak
There's a
peek,
sneak
people.
peek. Well, you did really good.
Thank you. So did
Yeah.
you.
Thanks. Okay, well, with that, stay crafty.
And not crimey.
Bye.